Hello everybody, it is February 12th, 2026 here in the United States of America, and in tonight's video I'd like to talk about whether or not American governance will move back towards competency in an effort to save the country, or will it keep just being performative for each party's respective constituencies. I think one of the biggest issues in this country is the two political factions vying for control of the government are so far apart in their values and their goals and their methods of governance that it almost seems like they're completely irreconcilable with one another. I mean, everyone talks about the uniparty, sure, and there is a measure of the uniparty behind the scenes, but on things like taxation, on things like whether or not certain social issues should be promoted in schools, on whether or not the border should be wide open or closed, on how much immigration should actually be allowed into the country. Those are things that I'd say both parties are pretty distinctly different on at this point. And it doesn't appear to me that either party really has a candidate at this point that I think is going to be the person that actually comes into office and fixes the country and saves it from some kind of future violent revolution. I know that people on both sides of the political aisle have gotten, more and more supportive of, or maybe resigned to the fact that maybe there is some kind of civil conflict waiting us in the future. And I would caution people against hoping for such a thing. One of the reasons being is civil wars, especially modern civil wars, tend to be incredibly violent and destructive. And in a country as armed as the United States of America, with as many people and as many weapons and different political factions, an actual second American Civil War would be a catastrophe. And I could almost guarantee that people watching this video, maybe myself included, would suffer personal loss in such a course of action. We're talking family members dying, property being destroyed, your entire lives being turned upside down for what? In some kind of vain effort to save the country or transform it into some bright, promising future. And I think the end result of that would just be complete and total destruction. The reason I say that is because the political factions vying for control of the country, I don't think any of them actually understand how to govern this massive, unwieldy beast that we have now. I think there's some people on the Republican side that I think have good ideas, maybe a few people on the progressive side of things. I'm not talking about the radical progressive left, but there seems to be some more moderate progressive voices that kind of have a good beat on the pulse of the country and what the country really needs to stabilize itself. But I would say the issue now is, though, the current leadership in charge of either party doesn't really seem to understand how to fix the country, to move the country forward into some kind of bright future. I mean, everything seems to be performative. When the Democrats get elected, they seem keen to just, as we can see in Virginia, they get a new Democratic governor and they raise taxes on literally everything, and overnight they start advocating for massive gun restrictions, higher taxes on everything, fines and fees for everything you could possibly imagine. Basically just, well, how do we make ourselves as unpopular as possible right out of the gate, and how do we piss off half the state immediately? Like, there's no concern for, okay, well, how do we govern the state in a way that makes things better for everybody? How do we come in here and manage things with a common sense attitude and provide for the common good, to actually improve things, to put more money in people's pockets, to improve their purchasing power, to make it easier to buy a home? No, it's entirely performative and based off of reactionary activism. Like, that's what you're getting. And then on the flip side of that, when you get a Republican in office, they make all these grandiose promises about housing prices and overhauling foreign policy and making things better for everybody. And the list goes on. And then when they get in office, it's, sorry guys, status quo. We're not doing any of that. Pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Those medical bills, whatever. We're not worried about that. Oh, housing prices. Well, we can't drop housing prices because it'll hurt the boomers. So sorry, you people under the age of 30, you're just not working hard enough. And here's what I'll say to that. I am 37 years old. I have a pretty decent job. I make pretty decent money, enough to have a single income household and raise multiple children and have a wife that doesn't have to work. it's still difficult, even with a fairly high paying job, sometimes to make ends meet. And I don't even have that big of a mortgage, actually. But everything has become so expensive, between insurance, between the price of vehicles, groceries, energy bills. Like, I'm actually switching over. I'm in the process of switching over to wood heat, predominantly in the winter, because natural gas is so expensive now. My last gas bill was $450 for 1 month. That is double what it was last year. And I was told that these issues were going to be fixed, that everything is better, and we're in the middle of a golden age. And if somebody like me, who is actually in an okay position, that has a pretty decent paying job and not a ridiculous amount of debt and a fairly low mortgage, if it's still hard for me occasionally to make ends meet, imagine how hard it is for people that have $1,000 a month mortgage. I mean, you could make $90 to $100K a year, and if you have a normal sized mortgage, say like $1,000 to $1,500 a month, that's not a thing. That's not a single income household. Your wife is going to have to work, and that's the norm. And then even houses out there now go for $400,000, $500,000, $600,000. Your mortgage is astronomically high at that point, and you have to have, in some cases, 10 to 12% down, cash on hand. Well, how are you supposed to save that? See, that's the disconnect, I think, between the Republican Party and the rest of the country. They talk a good game. They make all these wonderful promises before they come into office, and then when they get in there, it's pick yourself up by your bootstraps. When I was your age, I worked 2 jobs to save up, and I was able to buy a house with cash. It's not like that anymore, and I'm saying that as somebody who works very hard, who's competent, who's responsible. It is still very difficult, much more difficult than it was in the past, much more difficult than it was when my father was the same age as me. It is. That's the truth. And that's not being addressed. And this is leaving a lot of people with a very bad taste in their mouth. They don't really have any confidence in either party having any ability to fix things. It's just, no matter who wins, one side feels like it's being punished. If a Democrat wins in a predominantly Republican state, immediately they're going to be hit with things they absolutely hate. The half the citizens of that state, the ones that are registered Republicans or conservatives, immediately, because the Democrats are only in there to perform for their constituents. That's how this country is at this point. Our entire leadership is performative only for their constituency, and that's it. The other half of the country doesn't matter. We cannot move forward with a stable and coherent country with this kind of attitude. And the problem is, I don't know how we come back from this. Because there's certain things on the other side of the political aisle that are completely irreconcilable for me, that I know would destroy this country if I voted for. So my only choice in many cases is to vote for a Republican I know that isn't going to keep their promises, that is just going to make life worse for me anyways. And I know a lot of people have talked about just abstaining from voting completely to punish the Republican Party, to try to get them to keep their promises, because there's severe consequences if they don't. And I understand the goal of that. I understand the mindset behind that. But also, too, if people's lives start getting worse in the process, that I don't know if they're completely on board with something like that. Because at the end of the day, the average American wants stability. They want prosperity. They want relative peace. They want to be able to send their kids to public school without worrying about them coming home indoctrinated to be somebody that now hates their family. They want a normal country with nice, neat categories around gender, around sexuality. They want there to be a healthy atmosphere around dating, around marriage, around having families. They want to feel at peace with those things. They want to be able to wake up in the morning and say they're proud to be part of their community. They're proud to be part of the country. There's a deep longing for that on both sides of the aisle. And don't get me wrong, it's not just conservative Republicans that want this. There's many center-left progressives that are yearning for the same things too, that understand how far things have gone. Now, there's still some pretty serious disagreements between some of those conservatives and progressives, but I think a lot of them actually are starting to align on issues with corporate America and healthcare and things like that. But like I said, the average American just wants a few main things, and neither party is willing to provide those. Again, because this country is so dysfunctional that we can't seem to have any kind of leadership that is actually going to take responsibility and grabbing the reins of this country and actually trying to fix things. Everyone put their faith in the Trump administration to do this, myself included. I was optimistic in Trump's second term that finally okay, maybe he'll come into office with a little more experience, a little more political savvy, and actually start to fix things. And that hasn't seemed to happen yet. I think everyone seems to be a little dissatisfied with what's going on. You have this Justice Department that hasn't really seemed to have done anything in regards to keeping its promises with the Epstein files, or making arrests, dealing with corruption. I think because it wasn't possible to begin with without ripping the entire country apart. It's that bad. It's that much of a mess that their hands are tied. They can't do anything. The corruption is so deep within the system that I don't think it can be fixed by them. And that sucks because the alternative to that, the only outcome that can happen when things are that bad, is some kind of revolution. And I don't want to see that because of the amount of people that will die. I hope and pray that there is some kind of great man of history in the near future. And I don't know who it is. I don't know who it could be. I don't believe it's a current administration, as well-intentioned as they might be. I don't think it's anyone in that administration that is going to come in and do what needs to be done to turn this country around, to fix the problems that we have, to take the reins of the American political system. And then things might get ugly in the process. I think people need to keep in mind, when Augustus, took the reins of Rome, there was some fairly ugly things that had to happen for the Roman Republic to be stabilized. And I pray that those things don't have to happen here, but, well, I think some of them might be hard to avoid with as bad as things might be, but I just don't see the competence. I don't see the vision. I don't see the will in any of our politicians to actually be the person that does this, to say the right things to the American people, to unite them, to ease the tensions, to bring us together, to tamp down the radical elements within this country, either to... And a lot of radical elements in this country exist because of unkept promises. And if those promises were kept, those radical elements wouldn't exist in the first place. And there's some radical elements in this country that can be talked down and appeased by simply keeping those promises. And there's some that are bloodthirsty revolutionaries that wouldn't be happy with anything, as short of whatever revolution they want to see. But there still needs to be some kind of stabilizing force that comes in and does what's necessary to fix the country, but in a way that's done in a very politically intelligent manner that doesn't tear everything down and result in millions of people dying. Somebody smart enough to do this, somebody well read enough to do this, somebody politically savvy enough to do this. That's what this country is really yearning for, true leadership. And unfortunately, I don't see it. But that is what we need. Anyways, that's really all I wanted to talk about tonight. I will be back with another video this weekend, Saturday, and I also plan on doing a live stream Friday night, probably around 9 or 10 o'clock. But anyways, if everyone enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and until next time.